Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 69th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our panel discussion twice monthly to demonstrate that one of the best ways to learn is to listen to someone whose opinion differs from yours. Today our panel will discuss subjects that are being ignored by the current presidential candidates and to some extent the president himself. Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. Unfortunately, Natalie Sydorenko is not with us this morning. She is at home tending to her daughter Stephanie, who has come down with a serious cold. Bryan, today's candidates for the U.S. presidency appear to be in the usual campaign mode of highlighting their achievements, or what they think are their achievements, and attacking their opponents while ignoring most of the important issues facing the country. What issues would you like to hear discussed by candidates who would like your vote to be the next president of the United States and commander-in-chief?
Well, it presents a real problem, a conundrum, if you will, because the way the media cycle is, you can only get out little bits and pieces of your message, so they go with a daily sort of message, and they try to stick to that narrative. I wish that the campaigns of all the candidates would take the time to really develop what some serious answers are to some of the problems we have in our country. I'd love to hear a real open discussion about healthcare in our country. I'd love to hear a real discussion about immigration, not just the firebombs that you hear and the demagoguing that goes on about the issue overall. I think there are issues that we need to cover with those things, and we need to have an open discussion about it and come to some conclusions and compromise and to move forward and solve some of these issues. I think we have an issue that's starting to foment in the Middle East. We need to have an open discussion about that and where we go from there. I can't say that the candidates don't have answers. It's just that I think they're sort of penned in when it comes to giving those types of answers. And most people, the general consuming public, after about 2 minutes, they've changed the channel.
You don't think threats of carpet bombing really
make the ground
get to the heart of the issue?
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think that's an answer at all. And unfortunately, at this stage of the game, the candidates are playing to their base. Mr. Sanders does it. Mrs. Clinton does it. Mr. Trump. All of them are playing to their base. And then when they get into the general election, you start to see their message moderate. It's unfortunate that we haven't really elevated our discussion on these issues, because there's a whole host of them, and I would agree with a lot of the ones that get brought up about the environment. I'm not a big climate change person, but I think we need to be better stewards of of the planet and how that looks, but not just the standard answers that you hear on either side when it comes to those things. So unfortunately, I think they're sort of a product of the news cycle and what the media will take and how they edit things down and get those little sound bites that get people all worked up.
Yeah. While Ron is talking about the things that he would like to hear discussed, I would like you to be thinking about just what is Donald Trump's base. And we'll get around to that in a few minutes.
Sure.
Ron, what are your thoughts?
Well, John, pretty much what Bryan said.
Oh, really? Oh, well.
Then really, pretty much the same thing. And I listened to, for example, listen to the State of the Union address, and I thought it was a very well-constructed speech. Go the next day to my favorite fact-checking organization, I don't know if they call it factcheck.org, which is run by the Annenberg Foundation, Philadelphia, and they point out all of the, not lies, but the exaggerations, the use of statistics which are a little bit outdated, Same thing with Clinton and Sanders. I thought that was an interesting debate, and there was a little bit of fire, and I thought it was pretty respectful. They were attacking each other's ideas, not each other. I watched the Republican debate, and I think those people must have all come together in the same Volkswagen. It's a clown show. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know what they believe. I don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, I think there are a lot of serious issues. I mean, as you know, I'm concerned about climate change. I saw a program just last night on Nova where people were studying krill in the Antarctic Ocean. Now, krill are a little shrimp-like guy that eats phytoplankton, and the penguin eat them, the fish eat them, the whales eat them. They're basically the basis for the entire life cycle around Antarctica. And
Antarctica or
Antarctica.
Okay.
And they have discovered that down there, diving under the ice, that the krill are eating the phytoplankton, which are frozen into the surface of the ice sheet. And what's happened here, looking at satellite data for the last 30 or 40 years since we've had it, the Antarctic ice sheet is about as big as it ever was, but it doesn't last as long. It comes later in the year and it retreats quicker. So this means that the food supply for the krill isn't there as long. The krill populations in some areas are 90% what they were 10 years ago.
Really?
So this has grave implications. So it's philosophical. And why has that happened? It's because the climate is warming. NASA just came out today with 90% certain that 2015 is the warmest year on record. It's just in the paper today. 90%. That's pretty, as science goes, that's pretty darn sure.
But isn't it a fact, though, that the Antarctic is colder than it's been in a long time?
Antarctica is colder, but the ice pack doesn't show it. Sea temperatures are higher.
The ice pack in the Antarctic Peninsula, yeah, there's some warming there, but they don't know whether that's from geothermal activity or not. But when I think about the ice there, it boggles my mind. I cannot imagine 6 miles of ice on the continent and growing.
One of the first scenes of this show, a scientist is there in a particular bay. He says 2 years ago there were 500 feet of ice above us. It's gone. The glacier's gone. It's gone. And that's true for Alaska too.
We can get into that discussion in another program, but there are like 120,000
okay, but I mean, this is one
glaciers.
thing. Absolutely, this is one thing that our politicians aren't really talking about. Somebody say it throws out, a soundbite, a statement, as you say. So, I was going to ask Brian. I think you've answered that question. What do you think about the current cast of candidates, both sides? I mean, for me. Secretary Clinton looks like she's trying to build on Obama's base, and I think that's a pretty good base, being a Democrat. Bernie has some wonderful ideas. I can't begin to follow how he thinks he's going to pay for them. And I can't really get what the ideas are out of the Republican group, except a negative thing of let's stop Muslim immigration and let's, whatever. I just don't understand it. I don't know what's going on. They're not talking about it. They're not being civil about it, what they are talking about it. And will that change in the general election, whoever gets elected? I don't know. I should hope so. But maybe it's too late by then.
Brian, are you going to respond to his question?
Sure. I think that, like I said, all the candidates are playing to their base. You're hearing exactly what the base in the Democratic Party wants to hear. You have some extremes in the Democratic Party. They're folks that believe that we all should be riding bicycles, and they're all about oil and everything. And Bernie Sanders throws out some pretty, like you said, some pretty wild ideas. And the last time I checked, I think it was up to $63 trillion, all the freebies that he's thrown out as far as college, health care. I mean, you might as well throw in paying off your mortgage and free water and heat and all that kind of stuff. And this country cannot sustain that. We don't have $63 trillion to throw at these issues. So I don't think it's just a matter of taxing the rich and beating up on Wall Street. We were talking a little bit before we
I'm not
started.
sure the number's going to work out there. We have that many rich people.
Exactly, exactly. You can tax them all 100%. You're still not going to raise the amount that you need. So on the other side of the aisle, I'm just as disappointed, but unfortunately, it seems within the Republican Party over the last probably 15, 18 years, we think we need to eat our own. We need to beat them up so bad that when they come out of the primary, they're so scarred, and the opposite side doesn't have to do any opposition research. We've already done it for them. And I would like to see some coalescing. The notion that we have 6 or 8 people on stage and their ideas are worthy to listen to. I think that's one of the reasons why you think about our Governor John Kasich doing well in New Hampshire, because those people are fairly moderate. Mm-hmm. There's a moderate base that's just not being talked to, and people don't like to hear that when you've already thrown all your weight with Mr. Trump. Mm-hmm. I really don't see him as being a solution to anything. I know people are disappointed sometimes that we don't just all get on the bandwagon and build the wall, throw all the Muslims out of the country, and whatever knee-jerk thing he says needs to get thrown in the press.
Yeah,
So.
I watched part of that speech at Liberty University that he gave.
Liberty College,
yeah.
2 Corinthians.
That was one cringeworthy comment, but the other one when he said, in addition to the art of the deal, I think the Bible is #1. Go Bible.
Yeah.
Something like that,
Yeah.
Oh, that was terrible.
Pretty much
and what was significant about that is that he was going to hold up his own book first.
Yeah, he's there to sell books.
Where am I? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Let me bounce this idea off of you guys. There's sort of an overall thought that we've got serious problems involving racism, the war on drugs, the climate change, and people keep talking about the fact we need to have an honest discussion about these issues, particularly racism. We need to have an honest discussion. I've come to the conclusion that an honest discussion means one thing to one person and another one to someone else. But when I look at these 3 areas of the environment, the war on drugs, and the racial issues, there is so much invested in an infrastructure for all 3 of those things. There are a huge number, I think there are 18 very large environmental groups that have a large infrastructure. They have buildings and staff and real estate that has to be supported. Without global warming, or without the fear of global warming and the idea that humans are responsible for it, there's no real reason for them to exist or take in donations or to support their infrastructure. The same can be said of the private prison system, well, even the federal prison system. We have, and I looked this up this morning, there are 142 federal prisons and 66 private prisons in this country. We've got a bigger percentage of our population behind bars than any country in the world.
Which ties into the racial issue as well.
Yes, it does. Mm-hmm. Yes, it does, which ties into the whole war on drugs thing. But here's the problem. We recognize the shortcomings of the war on drugs. There have been issues written about it. Eric Holder talked about it. The president's talked about it, but we're not doing anything about it. Unfortunately, if we did the right things, the prison population would decrease. The prison population would decrease, which means that we don't need to have 142 federal prisons and 66 private prisons. The problem is most of these prisons are located in small rural areas where they are the focal point of the economy of those areas. And to close a prison means creating unemployment. It's an economically unpopular thing to do in these areas.
It's like closing a military base.
Sure.
Or similar.
Well, either that or stop producing military weapons that are not needed.
Yeah.
Ohio would lose a lot of jobs if we stopped redoing the Abrams tanks out in Lima, or the weapon systems that are being produced in Dayton. There would be a lot of unemployment. We've got senators in Ohio from both parties, Portman and Sherrod Brown, who both were very, very vigorous in promoting the idea of continuing those weapons systems, even though Secretary Panetta and also Gates said, we not only don't need those weapons, we don't know what to do with them. We already have too many things like that that are idle. But we have a problem fighting the infrastructures that are in place, being supported by racism, anthropogenic production of CO2, weapon systems, drugs. We can't have an honest discussion unless we're willing to face some really difficult facts. If we're to do the right thing on poverty and on drugs, we're going to be closing prisons and causing unemployment in small towns, but it happens all the time.
Okay, and then we're going to need to say, okay, we've got to be willing to commit the resources for retraining of individuals, for bringing in other kinds of industries. In Lima, they could build wind turbines, for example.
Absolutely, yes.
There are a lot of solutions, but the problem is everyone has a sacred cow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the folks on the left have wrapped themselves in the racial issue and the poverty issue, and when you start talking about any sort of change or any adjustment in that, they run that thing up the flagpole and they marshal their troops and they get their welfare industrial complex going, and next thing you know, you're all racist because you want to drug test the recipients of welfare, or you want to means test something, some sort of program. It feeds on itself, and I think that's where everybody has to step back and say, everybody has to give something. Mm-hmm. Everybody has to put something on the table, even if it's your sacred cow. If it gets gored, it gets gored. If it's on the right side, people talk about the military-industrial complex, and you can't have this, you can't have that. If the military, let's let the generals tell us what they need, not politicians. Mm-hmm. And I think when politicians get involved, I think history will show that they mess it up.
But one of the sacred cows in our culture is the civilian control over the military, which I would hate to see sacrificed any more than I'd hate to see freedom of the press sacrificed.
No, exactly. But when you have generals that know what the soldier needs, let's let them tell us if they need to continue to have a weapon system that they really don't want. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying we give up control of the military. I'm saying let's let the military decide what best works for them.
Now, wouldn't that be a wonderful topic for the candidates to talk about? Mm-hmm. Because they all want to be commander-in-chief. Mm-hmm. And there are stories that high-ranking officials in our military are being fired and demoted because they're saying things that the civilian authority disagrees with.
Right. Right. Because it goes against what the politician, if you have a military base or you have an industrial complex built up in your state like we do in other states, you don't want to see that go away. Mm-hmm. You go down to West Virginia and there's a lot of government activity going on down there. There's IRS, there's a big IRS center, all that. Nobody wants to see that when you start talking about maybe cutting back on, some of these things. They start screaming, and that's where the lobbyists come in, and they say, well, we don't, you can't have that happen.
That's because you're not willing. People aren't willing to look creatively at any kind of alternatives. Mm-hmm.
And that's a great point, because you have to have disruption. That creative disruption.
That's right.
And nobody wants that. Yeah. Nobody wants to hear that. But the government, I think, needs to go through some creative disruption. There has to be a different way to do things.
Do you think that would result in more competency in government?
I think we can really improve upon competency when it comes to the government. I think really. I go back to what I've said before, the farther you send your money away, the less control you have of it.
Well, it's like any kind of good business, isn't it? You hire good people and let them tell you how your business is going.
Right.
You maintain some oversight, and you may have final decisions like civilian control over the military, but you got to listen to your experts.
Exactly. Exactly.
And which brings me around to the point of the reliability of government statistics. It was reported about 2 weeks ago that the government statistics on building construction in the United States have been wrong for 10 years. And they are in the process of going back and adjusting 10 years worth of erroneous data that business people have been, and financial people have been making big decisions based on that false information that they've been getting for 10 years.
Yeah.
And when I think about the fact that the two big government statistics that drive business decision making, consumer price index for one, and the gross domestic product. In fact, I was really struck by China is just really suffering. Their GDP is down to 6.9%, and we're really working hard to get up to 3.
Well, we're below 2 if you look at some of the numbers. So.
Is that right?
Yeah.
One of the things about the ability or the freedom that the government has to adjust numbers based on political considerations. They always adjust GDP upward, and the consumer price index, or CPI, they adjust it downward. Mainly by deciding, as you know, the consumer price index is based on a market basket of products and services.
You got to put in the basket.
It
Right.
depends on what you put in
Exactly.
the basket, and
Yeah.
if you don't want to report that we're having inflation, take out food and fuel, which is what they did in times past. Now, I suppose fuel is back in.
Yeah, I bet they have.
And that was a direct input to me. They haven't raised my Social Security this year.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the reason why.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
artificially recorded
Yeah.
lower inflation.
They suppress it, or you know.
Well, you would know a lot about that
Well,
being in your
one
business.
One of the things that it's good to point out when you talk about getting people out of the way, you know, when they rolled out the Affordable Care Act with these, you know, with the computers and all that kind of stuff, maybe you don't remember, but they had a real problem with their website. We have some of the sharpest programmers and companies that are in this country. I don't have any problem with the folks in Canada. If you can do it better in Canada, then we'll use you. But the fact of the matter is, we have companies like Oracle, Google, and the list goes on, that could have put together a website that would have worked right out of the box. But the word was that they didn't, you know, they sort of just went with whoever they thought, you know, had done it in Canada or something like that. I think we can improve upon things. So why not keep some of that money here? I can't remember what it was. Was it $1 billion that they had to spend?
I'm going to speak out in favor of one of my favorite candidates this year. Carly Fiorina is saying the same things that you're saying, that we have got brilliant technical people in this country that can solve a lot of problems if we just ask them to.
Yeah.
But we're not.
Yeah.
I think it's I think it's our usual fear of science and technology that leads us into these traps. I mean, come on. It's out there, folks. You're right. We can use it. The numbers are there.
Well, look at what we're dealing with now. It wasn't that long ago, if you remember, peak oil. Remember that study that came out about peak oil?
No.
That the greatest scientists and geologists got together, and they put together this study and said we had X amount of oil left, and we were just hurtling down the pathway to running out of oil. Now we're awash in oil. Why? Because technology has been applied to that whole process. That they can go up and they can frack and they can stop. They can extract oil from sand and do all these things to where now we're actually going to start exporting oil. And what we're seeing now, currently, we've got more, you know, we're up to our eyeballs in oil.
Just for your information, in 1960, when I was in college in a department called fuel technology, saying we're running out of gas.
Yeah.
We're not going to end natural gas in 50 years. Well,
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Again.
we're fracking in
Yeah.
order to get it.
And natural gas and
But
LP.
I think we're going to have a lot of trouble exporting oil at, what are we, down below $30 a barrel now? We've got a lot of oil at $80 a barrel, 80 to 100. We don't have any at 30. I have a nephew who is in the oil business, and he said they're making more money selling brine that comes out of the oil wells than they are selling the oil now. And the brine is being used as a de-icer on highways and
Great.
so forth. It is. It
Great.
really is. As a matter of fact, I'll just throw this in. He was telling me that you go ahead and put a coating of brine on a roadway when it's well above freezing, ice won't form. It's a preventative measure. You don't have to wait until the ice is there and then dump a lot of corrosive salt
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah.
All that. But anyway, thought that was an interesting thing. I want to, just in the short period of time we have left, I do want to throw race relations out there because I think it's an incredibly important thing. And there are no shortage of voices asking for open, honest discussions. And, but every attempt that I've seen at that is one side claiming that all whites are racist by virtue of privilege and power. And that and it's very, very hard to have a free and open and productive discussion with somebody when you've already labeled them racist and you're not going to change your mind. But there are people, both black and white, left and right, that are hoping that we can have free and open discussions about it, and that without name calling and without
Labeling
prejudice.
somebody.
Yeah. And that, anyway, I think that is one of the things that we need to deal with. But I haven't heard one word out of any of the candidates about it. I think they're afraid to touch it. And anyway.
well, there's just yesterday, in fact, we reported, I think, through Time magazine, the word's coming out now about how the Republican Congress, when Obama was first elected, says absolutely we're not going to cooperate with this man. We're just not going to do anything.
Yeah.
Now can't tell how much of that is racially motivated.
Yeah.
Well, the Democrats did the same thing with Bush when he first went into office, and he decided that he was going to be the uniter in chief. And the first thing he did was invite Ted Kennedy over to watch a movie at the White House with the first family. The Democrats decided enough of that. We're not going that route, and it ended.
Right.
Well, thank you very much. It was a quick discussion. This is kind of fun. We're going to have to do it just with us boys more often. And thank you for watching.